What's up? And if you're watching this, welcome back to Comic Book Nation for our after show segment that has yet to be titled, but where we continue the discussion in a little bit of a more let our hair down fashion after our live stream and after our Paramount Plus show. We are here on our Comic Book Nation YouTube channel, and today joining me from the regular show is Mr. Connor Casey, who was on with us.
What up?
And jumping in from our comic book anime team, the man himself who crushes a lot of our anime subject matter, Mr. Nick Valdez is here.
Oh, man. Howdy, everybody. Thank you for having me. I wish it was under better circumstances.
Oh, yeah. So this is a team I've recruited to help me sift through the mess of Rick and Morty. So at the time of recording this week, the announcement broke that Rick and Morty star and co-creator and voice of Rick and Morty, Justin Roiland, was fired from the show because of both criminal domestic or felony domestic charges and some more unsavory things that had him possibly doing some very kind of questionable communications with people. This is that part I think is alleged. The felony domestic stuff is now a formal charge out in Los Angeles, I believe. And so, yeah, the combination of all that created obviously a kind of PR storm that made Adult Swim and the rest of the Rick and Morty team decide to cut ties with Roiland. And those ties, the cutting, I mean, he's just been cut loose Kanye style across pretty much everything. He got cut from Rick and Morty, his other show with Hulu, Solar Opposites, of which he is like the sole person kind of, it's not him and Dan Harmon, that's him. He got cut from that too. His game studio, Squanch Studios or Squanch Games, he had to cut ties with them too. So, I mean, it's been a pretty big week of fallout for all things Justin Roiland. And now we're kind of left with the question of what to do. Specifically, we're going to focus on what to do about Rick and Morty. So Adult Swim put out a statement saying they were formally announcing they were cutting ties with him, but also saying, we're going to keep Rick and Morty going. It's already in production on season 7. The crew is mad talented. We're not stopping this. You know, basically they said one monkey don't stop no show, and we're going to do this. All right. So that's left us in a kind of a weird discussion place because, you know, there are a lot of people who are obviously like, yeah, after all this came out, like, yeah, get that guy off the show, get him out of here. The question I have for you two gentlemen is, do you agree that Rick and Morty can continue without Justin Roiland? And then we're going to get into discussions about how or how not that might be feasible. So, Nick, you are the person who, I mean, you have jumped in and sorry, but you're the person who jumped in on the Rick and Morty beat and has been just nailing it for us for pretty much seasons 5 and 6. So how are you feeling, buddy?
Yeah, this is something that I've had to contend with as a professional person and as a fan of the series, you know. So what I'm so glad that they cut ties, you know, because there was a hint that they would continue because it's already been confirmed for 40 more episodes at this point. We're going straight through season 10. And, you know, it is one of the steadiest gigs in adult animation, which these days is hard to come by. So on the plus side, those are two big things. On the other hand, we're in an unprecedented front where 2 of the titular characters in a series are being replaced by someone new. So, you know, there are reports that Roiland hasn't been as involved with the creative side of things as he was maybe in the early days. So in a sense that, you know, that's not the worst case scenario, losing him, but it is going to be a thing of, you know, suddenly all this attention is going to be on season 7, where, you know, season 6, as someone who covers it day to day, you know, it wasn't the hottest season. And suddenly now this, honestly, like, this might be the best thing for it. Like, this is going to rejuvenate Rick and Morty. It's going to at least get so many more eyeballs on it to see how Adult Swim handles it from this point on. And unfortunately, it's probably also so far into production that we won't see any significant changes until season 8, maybe even season 9.
Yeah, that's a factor. I don't think a lot of people, I mean, as somebody, you are our expert on this, and even I don't think have sat back and kind of thought about that, about where when they said that little note in their message about separating with Roiland, they did say we're in production like on 7, which is kind of, I think, was the PR way of saying you guys are stuck with him for a little bit longer, like because we already paid that money and filmed that stuff, so we buckle in for that. But yeah, like you're right, season 8 or season 9, and we're going to talk about that. But first, I want to get Connor's thoughts on all this.
So it doesn't surprise me at all that they're continuing with the show. That massive, what was it, 70 episode deal that they signed on for years back, which I honestly thought was a giant albatross to the series to keep stretching it out ad infinitum like this. Because you look at other adult animation, Family Guy is unwatchable at this point, and the corpse of The Simpsons just got renewed for 2 more seasons. So the last thing you wanted to see was a show like this get dragged out to those levels, but yet this is exactly what we're setting ourselves up for. So it doesn't surprise me at all that it's continuing. As for what the show is going to look like, it really hinges on what performers they pick to get who's playing Rick, who's playing Morty. Is the same guy playing both? Is that same person going to be playing all the different background characters like Roiland would always do? And how is their delivery going to compare to his? Because, Nick, you mentioned how the creative side of things he wasn't as involved in. But so much of especially the Rick humor comes from his improvisation, his, the trailing off, the belching, and the random interjections. Same with Morty. So whoever they bring in has to either bring that exact same kind of flavor or do something completely different. And suddenly when we look back at the show when it's completed, we look at the Roiland era being these first 6 seasons and the name actor here for the rest of those seasons, and then people can debate endlessly as to which side was better, but they got to pick the right person first for that. I don't think the show is dead in the water. I think that, like you said, it's kind of the breath of fresh air that it needs. I mean, season 6 I think was better than season 5, but then again, nothing from this season topped how the evil Morty thing ended for now. So it's very much a question of, is this effectively a reboot? Can we fix some of the lifelessness that the show had been carrying for a bit?
So yeah, that's a good jumping off point. So Nick is covering a lot of this, and we're both kind of writing, because I do a little Rick and Morty myself, but we're writing some kind of thought pieces and spec pieces, and there's one I've been kind of obsessed with, and I want to get to. So yeah, on the one hand, first of all, Roiland's voices were I got to talk to him this year before, I think Nick did too, before season 6 came out. We both did. And, he was admitting that, like Connor said, yeah, at this point, he was just standing in a booth, doing both voices, talking to himself and just riffing a lot of it and being like, yeah, a lot of it is just now by this point, I've done this so long, like it's that. So there is a certain amount of truth to that. I mean, on the other hand, we've seen, there have been so many viral videos that Roiland himself has even endorsed of people impressionists who have picked up on the Rick and Morty voices and are able to do them, so spot on in impressions that even, like I said, Roiland himself was like, damn, that guy's good. So,
but then it's a question of, do you want it to be an impression?
Exactly.
Or do you want someone to bring something new?
And that's where I'm coming to. So I think Nick has said something about, we're going to be stuck with them. And I think it's good that we actually do have to stick with this through season 7, through at least the first part of season 7, I would estimate. At least the first half.
Yeah, I feel like, sorry to interrupt, but I feel like if they do go that route, it's going to be kind of like what they did in Big Mouth, where, we had Jenny Slate voicing one of the characters, her character for like the majority of the season. Then in the last episode, it gets switched out to the new cast member because it's so late in production at that point. And we might get something like that here. Either that or whoever they get is unfortunately going to have to stick to the script and stick to like Roiland's cadence. And, they won't be able to inject so much of their own personality, at least, yes, until season 8, season 9. Since this one, it's already written, it's probably already much further along than we suspect.
Let me ask you this, because he's getting kicked off the show because of a crime. With Jenny Slate, it was, hey, we've got an issue with this actress portraying this character of color, and we wanted to have those things match up more. Would they be more inclined, because it's voice acting, it's not physical acting where they have to go and reshoot everything. They could essentially record everything. Would they, entertain the idea of whoever they pick to go back and record the lines that Justin already did?
Yes, that's very much on the table, and that's also probably why, the idea of imitating the voice is getting thrown out there.
Sure.
I agree with Kofi that that's not something I want. We've seen Adult Swim handle this before with the likes of Squidbillies when they had to replace Unknown Hinson for the voice of Early Kyler. They straight up, Adult Swim kind of swung for the fences and were like, hey, we got Tracy Morgan for this. They addressed it in like the first 2 minutes of the premiere, and that's kind of what I hope we get for Rick and Morty season 7. Like, it's so far in, we won't see any big story changes addressing why voices are changed. We'll probably get a cold open in like episode 2 where they're like, oh, suddenly our voices are different, and it's whoever the new performers are. But they are going to have to match a lot of what has already been recorded in terms of, these animated lip flaps and all the likes of that.
See? And here's where I'm kind of coming to, and you guys have even set my launch pad up even better. This is a piece I'm writing right now, and when I get out of here, I got to finish it. But yeah, the Rick and Morty is unique in that the show has, from the very beginnings, really from the very first opening credit sequence, made you kind of entertain the idea that nobody and nothing is safe. The opening credits has that scene of Rick abandoning Morty to get killed, and you look at that and you're like, wait, what? And then you realize as the show goes on that he's done this many times. And you even get to that season 1, episode 9 episode that I made one of my friends who said, how do I get in Rick and Morty? I was like, if you can handle this, you'll handle the rest of the show, which is the one where they Cronenberg the universe. And the ending of that is so dark, where they go to that alternate universe with their alternate selves who die, and then they bury themselves, which is not the last time the series has done this, which is swap out major characters or entire realities that we got comfortable in and been like, yeah, now it's somebody else, or now it's something else. So Rick and Morty has already laid down that precedent. And so, like Nick said, if something happens in the show to change them, it's actually something that they can have fun with in universe. My thing that I'm writing now is I think the show does need to do something different. I'm with Nick, but I think it needs to make it a big swing for the fences change. And meaning like, and they have a unique opportunity right now, which is why I was talking about season 7, either at the end of season 7 or some midpoint. We started this whole Rick Prime thing. And if you don't know behind the scenes, one big change that happened in Rick and Morty season 5 is Scott Marder came on as a producer. And if you don't recognize the name, Scott Marder is, that guy does one thing. He goes to comedy series that have been on for a while, but still kind of muddled. He says, here's your mythology. Here's what's best about you. We're streamlining this. And now we're going to be like funnier and more cohesive as a continuity and mythos going forward, because your show's gotten that popular. He did it with It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia around season 5 or so, when that show really kind of locked in. And he did it here with Rick and Morty. I think he came in like somewhere in 4, but was just behind the scenes. And 5 was the time where we start to see him really pull it all together and say, okay, you got to start answering some of this stuff. You got to start dealing with some of this stuff. You can't just be this weird avant-garde, like all over the place, you're too popular. And so he's really been the person they've handed off. And that became clear in the interviews, like talking to Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland, they're like, ask Scott. And like, he knows. And like Scott Marder would answer. So he can be handed the reins. But I think you do need to do something narratively where you can use your villains, your mythos, Rick Prime, Evil Morty, both out there, right? But I think our Rick and Morty we know have to lose. They have to die. They have to be killed. And they lose. And the show then switches, because it can do this, to a new Rick and Morty, like an entirely new version of Rick and Morty, who will come into the show and even just do like a Tailies Lost thing, make fun of Lost, hell, like where you jump to this other set of characters on the island and now they kind of take over. And I think you need to do that. And these alternate Rick and Mortys would have alternate voices. None of that would be too jarring. It'd all be kind of a meta wink thing that the kind of fandom would appreciate. And it would like do exactly what Nick said. It would make it a new story for us to open and kind of follow, make it interesting again. It'd still be Rick and Morty, but slightly tweaked, slightly different, new histories, new backstories, new dynamic, new voices. Same supporting characters because they're interchangeable. The Beths, the Jerrys, the Summers. And now this Rick and Morty has to come and deal with these threats that the other Rick and Morty, like Rick C-137, and, he didn't maybe get it done. And so there are these other Ricks that come in and do that. And that's kind of a soft reboot, and it's a big swing. But I think, like I said, this is the one show that I would have faith can pull it off. And so you have a new actor, and I'm bringing somebody. One of my favorite suggestions from Twitter was bring in Regina King to do one or two of these voices, like make her like Rick and Morty, and just give us a little Boondocks.
So
week.
it's just the Boondocks in space now.
Yeah. I mean, having heard you at least one of them, I would love that. I'd be totally down for it. But I mean, you can, like you said, you can get a big distinctive voice, whether it's H. John Benjamin, Regina King, people we know from animation who do all this great work. Sabat, all these people who are out there. And so you can bring them in, have a big name that is a distinctly different voice, no imitations, no trying to continue rolling. And like Connor said, you have a distinct part of the show where it's like, this was the Roiland Rick and Morty saga. Now we expand and we start doing something different with these new actors, and it's still the characters, but new versions. So
you mentioned
my 2 cents. And that's what I
Sabat, and now I just want Sean Schemmel to play Morty.
Yeah. I mean, I do hope it's 2 actors. Let 2 people go into booth and kind of play off each other that way, because that also would be that extra bit of energy. Instead of relying on one talent to try and, it goes back to the imitator thing, because we're already going to have tons of, let's say, annoying, I'm gonna be outright saying it, like annoying conversations about, oh, this isn't as good as Roiland, oh, this isn't as good as it was before. Like, let's avoid all of that.
In my whole piece begins with, look, we know this story. We know how we've seen it too many times. People say, screw Roiland, he's a monster, get him out of here, get new person in for Rick and Morty. And of those people, the majority fraction of them even will then say, this isn't the same. This isn't my Rick and Morty. They should have just ended it. Let's get out of here. And then they'll be gone. And then it's a slow death, like Connor says. It's before long, we're watching the corpse of Rick and Morty in season 23, right? And nobody wants that. So, yeah, like the imitation thing, I think you got to get rid of. And I think you got to, like I said, swing and give people a new premise and a new Rick and Morty in the one show you can pretty much, besides like Loki, that you can do that. And just be like, yep, whole new Rick and Morty. You've seen this before. Now it's just slightly different, and let people go in that way. But that's just me. You guys have any final thoughts on solving this mess? I feel bad. I feel so bad for the rest of the Rick and Morty crew.
Right. Yeah.
The animators, everybody who finally locked in this job was like, I wasn't sure it was going to last, but here we are. Now we're like rolling. Yeah. No pun intended. Now we're rolling. And like, then this.
I have one idea. When they say, hey, we're going to introduce the new voice cast in this episode, have the episode be a silent episode. And then just have them flip off the camera, and then you have to wait till next week to hear them.
That would be
like that idea.
I really like that idea too. I really like that idea, and it's a very Rick and Morty thing to do. So I mean, Connor, I hope your idea goes up the ladder and gets to somebody, because it needs to happen. That would be, and it would just be an amazing episode. Like, and I love when they
a whole silent movie episode, right? Yep. Like, instead of speaking, we get the words on screen, and
from Silent Planet, that'd be amazing. Oh man! All right, so that's Rick and Morty. Nick, thank you for taking your time off from your day to come in and sludge through this mud with us. You can stick around, and we're going to talk about The Last of Us latest episode and kind of what's coming up. If you want to hang out for that, you can. Otherwise, you can get back to your busy day.
Yeah, I wish I could, but I haven't seen it. I mean, I guess I have to now, right? Season 2. But thanks for having me, everybody. I really appreciate it.
Later, Nick.
Nick Valdez, and you can always find his work over on our comicbook.com anime page, where we cover anime, manga, and kind of all things from Adult Swim and other places that kind of really do house and promote anime. So check out his work over there. Connor, for the end of our bonus section today, you and I are just going to trade a couple quick thoughts. What'd you think about The Last of Us episode 2? You liking the show?
So I'm in the weird spot where I still haven't played the games, but I know what happens. So I knew this was this is the lone wolf and cub story. This is not lone wolf and cub and motherly character story. So I knew Tess was going to bite it here pretty quickly. But no, the show is fantastic. I freaking love Chernobyl and try to get. It's one of those shows where it's like, this is one of the best written shows I've ever seen. It is also impossible to recommend to somebody because it just gets horrific at so many different points. That being said, so much of what made that show great has transferred to this. And I think what's interesting is that the stuff that specifically is new to the show that was added in is being praised as some of the outright best scenes. The opener from last week, in the 1960s. This week with the scientists being like, your only solution is to bomb this city and everyone in it. Little details like that they're chilling, but they help make this world feel all that much realer.
Yeah, that opening scene really messed me up. Like, what if, because that's it is what, like, there's always going to be a scientist who knows first, like, how screwed we are. And then she was just like, I just want to go home and be with my family. And I was like,
Right.
oh God. Like, yeah, this whole thing with the fungus is terrifying. Cordyceps research has gone up. My psychology studying fungus is now about to be like the hottest new thing at college. Is
The mouth tendrils is what gets me, because they're just so unsettling.
Well, it's it's even worse when you look in real life and real science. Like, there's pictures now that people are like that are searching on Google of like what it looks like when a cordyceps, it can't inhabit humans. Let's all be clear about that. It can't infect humans, but it can infect insects. And what they say in the show is correct. It gets into a body, it replicates and replaces the body's cells with its own fibers, mycelium, and then it takes it for a puppet walk. And there's pictures of like a grasshopper that's infected with cordyceps. Cordyceps, a lot of them are fungus that are just attached and parasitic to caterpillars. And you see these things and it's like, yeah, this thing just takes over. It finds the body, it takes over, and it's like, now I'm in charge. And so, yeah, thinking about how that could go wrong is really terrifying. And it's just a slight mutation change, right? But luckily none of that has happened in millions of years, and we're okay.
We're safe. Not the global warming thing isn't going to cause this, like the show indicated.
No,
that was
Earth is a little bit more timeless and enduring than that. And fungus have seen some things with the dinosaurs and whatnot. So yeah, these temperatures I don't know about, but it's just but it's good science fiction and horror because it's that slight tweak of reality that makes you think it could happen and then keeps you up at night. And every time now you're covering your floors, and every time you see that black mold or the red mold or whatever, you're like, you're going in. But yeah, I mean, I'm really digging the show in episode 2 more so as they've broken away and like you said, added new scenes and done stuff. I think it enhances what the game did. The things like the hive mind aspect, which is nowhere in the games, but better be part of The Last of Us Part 3 now, like better. Like, that's a change. And Neil Druckmann, like kind of one of the writer of the game, approved that. And it is more terrifying. I would love to play the game where you step on one thing and then you hear like in the distance this roar, and then like you're in an open battlefield and it's just like a horde of infected coming and you have to hide and fight and get out of there and do that. That'd be really awesome. So
correct me if I'm wrong, but the second game kind of put for big portions of the game, the infected are kind of in the background.
Yeah, it's not.
It's more about Ellie's revenge.
It's literally about the title, like The Last of Us. It's about these last vestiges of humans and how they've organized into different camps and like what those camps are going and the cycle of violence between them. One did something to the other. Now somebody has to do something to the other. And it's all about kind of this thing about even in the midst of doomsday, we're still killing ourselves and doing all the horrible stuff to each other. So
now let me ask you this, because we mentioned in the main show that season 2 is confirmed. And it reminded me of an article I read from an interview where Craig Mazin, the guy behind Chernobyl, who, he's on this show and he's doing a lot of this stuff with Druckmann. He says he wants it to be 3 seasons. Now there's not a third game.
You have to split up the second game. It's too long and it's too.
Do you have to split up the second game, or do you have to add more stuff to season 2?
I think you have to do both. I think you have to. I can tell you exactly what I think you have to do. I think you have to kind of tell the interim story that the second game doesn't cover, and only in brief flashbacks, which is what happened between the years between the end of the first game and the second game, and how it affected Joel and Ellie's, or whoever survives, relationship, let's say. I don't want to go into too many spoilers, but then yes, there's this big new 2-pronged story with 2 main characters that happens in the second game. So I think you have to fill in the gaps and show that interim period that the second game hints at in flashbacks and stuff about just what happened in the immediate aftermath of the first game and what it leads to and the kind of destruction and how it changes things. And then I think you have to end the second season with the first significant chapter of the game, which ends in a very drastic.
So a certain character dying via a golf club needs to be the end.
And you end there, or you end right after that with the mission of kind of like the revenge part. And then the third season is about 2 different characters kind of circling each other for this kind of revenge kind of thing and that they got to kind of work out. So I think that's how you do it. I mean, it seems like the easiest way, but it's going to be nuts to see when that shift happens and what happens to
Like
people. So
y'all thought the Red Wedding was upsetting.
yeah.
I mean, this thing tore the fan base in two. And as
Oh,
someone who's on the outside, I saw how ugly it got.
Oh yeah. I mean, I even knew going into the second game and I was still just like, it was nuts. But yeah, as we get off, we're going to conclude with saying, yeah, you can always check out immediate recaps. The ComicBook.com podcast network now has The Last of Pods, which our own Brandon Davis does with Ash Crossan of ET. And every week they break down the episodes. They have, people from the show on. So check that out every week. This week coming up is going to be the first real, I think, big controversial episode 3, which tells the story of Frank and Bill, who are characters from the first part of the game that made a significant impact and really became kind of like breakout fan favorite part of the game. So it's also going to challenge some of the people about kind of because people I don't understand some of the deeper character things and the nature of some of the characters in the series and what it really does deal with, like underneath on the subtext about anything from like identity and gender to, sex and love and relationships. And people don't really know that's coming. And so this is going to be kind of one of the first hints, and I can't wait to see what Twitter does afterwards. So that's The Last of Us. Connor, thank you for hanging out and discussing episode 2 with me. Episode 3 is coming up. You can check out The Last of Pods every week on our Comic Book Podcast Network, which is on all major podcast platforms. This is Comic Book Nation. This is our bonus overtime. Hope you check in every week. We will be putting these up on our YouTube page where you can get more of our discussion of some of the even more geekier things we like to talk about. I'm Kofi Outlaw. You can follow me at Twitter at Kofi Outlaw.
At Connor KCCB on Twitter. Check us out on TikTok, Comic Book Wrestling, and check out all our coverage of the Royal Rumble this Saturday. Myself, Matt's on the scene. Nick will be helping with the writing, as will Evan Valentine. We got the whole thing covered wall to wall, so don't you dare miss it.
All right, and be back next week for our regular show every Friday at noon Eastern, live on Comic Book Nation YouTube. See you guys then. Peace.